So we are live today at TechThursday, and greetings to Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, and welcome to our October TechThursday session on the TechThursday series. This is a deep dive content event shared by my great colleague Kim from our Nordics Center of Excellence. The format is always that Kim shares a lot of practical and technical stuff. All sessions are available on the webpage, and recordings will also be available on YouTube. Links will be shared after the sessions as soon as we can publish it. And my name is Claus Petersen. I'm head of sales in the Cloud of Security and Software department in Denmark. And without further ado, I think let's dive into the stuff and give the mic to Kim.
Thank you, Klaus. As Klaus mentioned, my name is Kim Pettersson, and I work as a cloud solutions architect in the TD SYNNEX Nordic region. And today, on this session of TechThursday, we are gonna talk about Azure Identity Management and look into a bit of the details of that. So, if we hop into the agenda of today, we're first going to talk about identities in Azure, and what I mean about that is the different identity stores we have in Azure, what differs them. So some of these things will be fairly easy things you most likely know already, but we are going to look into a bit of the functionality and when to use what of those. We are going to look into a bit of the security features of Azure Active Directory as well, such as PIM and conditional access, and a little bit more. And I'm going to mention and have a quick demo as well of the of service principals versus managed identities. This is a fairly quick bit, but I feel it's a fairly important part, so I want to mention it. I will demo that as well as a couple of other security technologies within Azure AD. And feel free to ask questions during the presentation. We will try our best to answer them as we go on. So let's start with the identities in Azure, and we're going to start off with something I think many of you already know, and but we're still going to go into a bit of the details and the definitions of Azure Active Directory. So to understand what Azure AD is, it's a cloud-based identity and access management system. Basically, it is a cloud-based directory. And we have seen the name Microsoft 365 directory or tenant or even Dynamics directory and all that. And this is something that I need to clear out before we continue. All of these are the same thing. Azure tenant and a Microsoft 365 tenant, it is the same thing. If you add a user in Microsoft 365 portal, it will be reflected in the Azure portal, just like that. So this directory consists of a couple of different identity types. So the most common is the user identity type, and that is much like a classic Active Directory. It's a user with a bunch of properties, email, of course, the department and whatnot. And these user identities, they do exist in a couple of ways. They can exist in cloud only, meaning that they are created in Azure, created in the cloud, and nothing more. But we also have the hybrid identities. And if you have a customer, let's say, with an existing Active Directory infrastructure, you can utilize one of the two technologies, such as Azure AD Connect Sync and Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync, to synchronize those identities. And the identity will be then they will be identified as a directory synced identity or a hybrid identity. And we are going to go into a bit of details about these two sync variants in the next slide. But the other identity that I want to mention, especially when I talk about another quite similar directory, that's the B2B identities. B2B identities is very simply put, it's an invited identity, an Azure or Microsoft 365 identity from another directory that is invited as a guest. So it's nothing more than that. But we still need to understand the difference between the internal and external identity. On top of it, we do have so-called app identities, and we're going to look into a bit more detail what that entails in the end of this presentation. And that is primarily things like service principals and managed identities. And we do also have device identities. And this is we're going to look into it in the next thing on the device join, because we can synchronize from let's say premise identity, the computer objects, and we can actually AD join certain devices. But I really want to clarify the big difference here, because I've seen some people who mix up a bit classical AD and Azure AD when it comes to the device part. So we need to understand first off what Azure AD isn't. This isn't a Kerberos based NTLM LDAP directory. Absolutely not. Which means that you can't AD join machines in a classic manner to Azure Active Directory. That does not mean that you can't join them. We have first the possibility to AD join devices, such and that with devices I mean Windows 10, Windows 11 devices primarily, and to some extent with other solutions, even Macs. And that is with the Azure AD join. As I mentioned, the minimum version is Windows 10 for this to work, and it differs quite a bit from a classical AD join or Active Directory join. And the functionality you will gain from that is, of course, the possibility to log in with a user contained in the Azure Active Directory, but you have the full possibility to add things like Intune management on top of that and other device management solutions on top of that you can extend Azure AD with. When we have the scenario when we have hybrid identities that are synced between an on-premises Active Directory, we also can hybrid join devices. And hybrid join is pretty much what it sounds like. That means that the device has been joined to the classical Active Directory, but we will also add the functionality for AD join. The difference here is, and this is really important, the device join or hybrid join is not configured from Azure Active Directory. It is configured from the Azure AD Connect sync, and from the synchronization server. So please don't go in and domain AD join your machine as well, because what will happen then is the machine will basically have a dual profile. So what hybrid join is, it joins your profile that you will log into the same profile, even though you log in with your Azure AD credentials or your on-premises credentials. There is also a third option that I want to explain a bit that is even more confusing, because I mentioned that you can't join a server onto Azure Active Directory, and that's true. If you have a server 2016, 19, 22 on premises, you can't join it to Azure AD. not out of the box at least. However, if that service is provisioned in Azure, what you can do is you can actually define when you provision that server that you want it Azure AD joined as well. That gives you the possibility to add access rights by RBAC roles on that server, meaning that you can actually log into it with your Azure AD credentials. From a server perspective, this actually looks like a proper AD join. It is done by a Azure specific agent, so it's not AD join in the traditional sense, even though the server sees it like that. If you look at the domain name, the domain name will always be the same. It will be Azure AD / your user. So it's fairly limited in that sense. But I wanted to mention that because sometimes people mix together these what these mean. Another inherent thing that we're going to look into more in detail is the security measures that we can utilize in Azure AD. And for a couple of examples, MFA is of course something that we can enable straight out of the box. We have conditional access, which we are going to look into a bit, and PIM as well, that we're going to look into in a few slides. We have the possibility for identity and access governance, meaning that we can create reports of see who can access what, and among other things, and vet access for users. And Azure Active Directory in itself is a free solution. You can create it even without a credit card or even without an Azure subscription. However, the functionalities within Azure AD is dependent on different licenses, such as conditional access requires a so-called P1 license, and that PIM requires a P2 license. And the P1 and P2, you can buy them at a specific user basis, but they are also bundled. For instance, the P1 license is bundled in the Microsoft 365 Business Premium license, and the P2 is bundled in the Microsoft 365 E5 license, for example. So there are several ways of gaining those licenses. So that's Azure Active Directory. And now I mentioned a bit about hybrid identities. I mentioned about how to join things to Azure Active Directory. And I'm going to confuse it even more. Oh, sorry. No, I'm not going to do that straight away. We're going to hop into that soon. We are first up going to talk a bit about the Azure AD Connect sync. And we have seen some news there. So for those of you who have been working with Azure Active Directory, most likely you have seen Azure AD Connect sync. It's not a new technology. It's been around for many years. And in its original sense, it is an agent that you are running on a Active Directory server or another server that has line of sight basically to a Active Directory server. And what it does, it synchronizes users and the devices in a scope that you set on the agent. So all of the configuration that you define, who are you going to sync, what are you going to sync, and all that, that's something that's defined on an agent level on the server. So if, for instance, the server dies, that configuration is gone if you can't recover it. And we also have a limitation here that we can synchronize multiple forests, but only from the same context, so to speak, from the same server. And these will then be of course synchronized up to Azure AD with their respective names. However, a functionality that's been asked for years and years is the possibility to synchronize from several contexts and forests that are disconnected, or in plain English, from several different AD servers at once. And this is where Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync comes in. So it allows you to do just that. And it also updates a few things, such as the provisioning data of those. These are, instead of being stored on the agent itself on the server, they are stored actually in Azure Active Directory. And we're using really lightweight, highly available agents, meaning we can have several agents reporting data up to Azure here instead of Azure AD Connect Sync, which only allows for one client. You can actually set it in a, say, quasi-edge high availability mode with the old one, meaning you have a staging mode set up on another server, but it's not elegant at all. But there are a couple of limitations. All the things that you see on the left on the Azure AD Connect Sync, those are things that can't be synchronized, such as device objects, LDAP directories, and very specific filters. Those can't be utilized in Cloud Sync. We also have a limitation on the top amount of members. We have 50,000. So this is a new product. It's not fully fledged yet compared to the old agent, but it is being developed as we speak. But as I mentioned, I'm gonna talk a bit more about a bit confusing technology and try to make sense of it for you. And that's Azure Active Directory domain services. And this is quite an interesting solution. This is basically a classic domain controller in the cloud. I mentioned it's serverless, and from a management perspective, yes, it is. You don't manage any servers. You don't have access to RDP to any servers. This does not mean that there aren't servers around. You actually get a pair of highly available servers when you deploy this service. But the only thing that you can access towards those is from the management toolkit, or the RSAT toolkit is what you can connect to them and, for instance, edit the DNS or also GPO objects. But there are a couple of differences as well. So first of all, we're going to look into when and why is this needed. So this is typically when you have a Azure only solution. Let's say you have a new customer, a new company perhaps, that is born in the cloud, but they onboard some sort of system that needs Kerberos based authentication, for instance. Then you can deploy this. It is possible to utilize this for clients as well. It's an excellent solution for Azure Virtual Desktop, for instance, and you can join things on premises as well to it. Using a VPN connection, you can use it as any other AD solution. But I also want to underline what it isn't. It's not it's not something to replace an existing AD infrastructure with. Because first off, when it comes to how the identities are synced, the identities always originate in Azure AD. So you can't, for instance, log in to it and start adding identities with users and computers pane, or you have to work from the Azure AD. You can utilize on-premise synced identities, but this does not mean that this becomes an extension of your existing AD infrastructure. For instance, there are many things like GPOs that won't be synchronized up there. And you could say it is basically a completely new forest that's created out of this. And it's also a single directory. So even though you have a whole bunch of domain names in your Azure Active Directory, you have to select one single domain name. You have the full possibility to select whatever you want, but still it's only that one. And you only are able to synchronize internal identities, meaning that the identities you have created yourself within or synchronized yourself within the Azure AD. So no external identities, no guest accounts will be synchronized. And this is where I really want to underline that this is not a replacement for a classic ID, and that is with the fact that you can't do hybrid join with this. So if you have the need for, let's say, to have a hybrid join scenario, but you have domain controllers already, this is sadly not the solution for you. I would recommend to stage up something like a B2S server instead in Azure and utilize a VPN connection to simply add those instead. You do have an internal DNS, much like you have on a Active Directory solution. You can edit that as well. So that is fully possible. And this is, however, if you compare it to Azure Active Directory, it's a paid solution. So what this means is you will need a Azure subscription, and you will need an Azure Virtual Network as well for this. And the pricing begins in the standard SKU of roughly 120 euros per month, going up to the premium SKU to almost 1,300 euros. The SKUs here, the primary things that differentiates those is the amount of objects that is recommended that you use them for, and the amount of hourly sign-ins and usage within the directory. So there's the biggest one, and then you have the possibility for the resource trusts, and in the standard you have 0, in enterprise 5, and in premium 10 of those. So that is Azure Active Directory Domain Services, or AADDS as it's also called. Then we have another kind of tenant, and this is a really interesting tenant. Azure AD B2C is a technology that reminds quite a bit of a classic Azure AD tenant. So it is, but the biggest difference with it is that this is a business to customer tenant. This is a directory meant to be used for your applications, your applications targeted toward end users, and that's end users that could be, or end customers. It's also known as the Customer Identity Management System, or a CIAM. So much like the AADDS, this is dependent on an Azure subscription, and the pricing of this, it's actually free up to the first 50,000 users. But afterwards, you have the MAU pricing, or monthly active users, and those are based on the functionality you want enabled on a P1 or P2 level. So you are paying basically for every single user above 50,000. And the really cool thing about this is the federation, in the built-in federation. So this is a solution that it's not a pre-packaged solution that you start using straight out of the box. You have to customize it to your to your application, as it is a white label solution. But what you get with that is a federation with different identity providers, and that could be Facebook and Apple ID, for instance. You can also federate with existing things like customers own Microsoft 365 tenant accounts and so on. And let's say that people don't want to utilize this. This can also be a local account store where people can simply sign up with username and password, email, for instance, or as simple as a phone number, and the password is just a text message that's sent out. So what this is, of course, you will have a user store with the data that you get from these federated services, usually first name, last name, email address, things like that. And you can also add more attributes. You can take in attributes from these services. That could be phone numbers, for instance, and things like that. And you can use this as basically your or use store, where you can store up to 100 attributes per in total. Meaning that, let's say you have an application that have different SKUs, you can say that user A has SKU A and user C has SKU B, etc., etc. You have the possibility to put in. It could be like the customer is a part of a certain region and only gets access to a certain amount of functionality in your applications, depending on local legislation. So it's really up to whatever you need, whatever attributes you need. So, but you can also utilize external customer data sources. It could be something like a SQL database, for instance, where we have all of these attributes that we can point to something like that as well. And I mentioned that this is a white label solution. What that means is even though the login page is hosted in Azure AD, you can customize it a lot. So it basically becomes a seamless integration of your application. You also have a functionality built into this called progressive profiling. And that one is really interesting, because what you want when you sign up for a service is you want a quick sign up. You want a very easy sign up experience, and you want the customer to be able to start utilizing the service as soon as possible. But you might need more details as time goes on. For instance, the user could perhaps be have a Facebook account with no phone number, and you require a phone number. Then you can set a rule that for the next login, I will ask you, hey, please add your phone number as well. And then perhaps on the next one, hey, can you please add your regional data or things like that. So this is a way of really easing the sign up process. You also have, depending on the federation partner, you have third-party identity verifications, and that if you look at how the world looks today, with a lot of bot factories and things like that, and lots of fake profiles and whatnot, it's of course of essence that we vet all of these federated identities. So we have the possibility to get a score and the risk analysis of these users and take action upon of that. If you see this is classed as an obvious fake user, then we can simply block the sign up process before it even happens. And we also have within this tenant a couple of different user types. So first off, we have the consumer type, which is basically your end customer. And this customer will, of course, consume your application, nothing more than that. But we have a few other types of users as well. We have the work user, which is an internal user in the Azure AD B2C, which has you can add admin roles onto, who can then administrate the tenant itself. And let's say that, well, let's just say that you are hosting a forum and you want some moderation, you want a co-moderator. You can actually invite a guest administrator as well. The limitations there, this guest administrator needs to have a Azure Microsoft 365 based account, but you simply invite that individual and give that individual then the administrative privileges they need. So that concludes the Azure AD B2C tenant. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the security features of primarily Azure AD. And I want to start off with something called Privileged Identity Management. And what PIM basically is, it's a system or a service to manage and control who can access important resources. And resources that could be an a role in Azure AD, let's say the global administrator or DevOps role or something like that, like a DevOps administrator, things like that. It could be who can become an owner and so on. And what this means is, let's say we have a user who we want to have give owner permissions to, but we don't want to make to have that user having constant owner permissions, because this involves a couple of risks. I mean, if the user's account gets breached, we have the risk of the user then of the attacker gaining access that they really shouldn't have. And of course, if the user perhaps does something by mistake, for instance, deletes a DNS zone or something like that, we can reduce the possibility of that happening by using PIM. And how that works is basically just-in-time access. So let's say we assign someone owner on a subscription, but before the individual can start using the owner role, he or she will have to hop in to JIT or to PIM and activate themselves as a owner. And that can be quite simple, that they just hop in and they already have the possibility to do so, and they are then active for, let's say, 8 hours or something like that, depending on, I will show you in a bit how that works. But you can also require multi-factor authentication, that you will have to answer a SMS or something like that to gain that access. You can also set in an access approval scheme where, let's say, an approver will have to approve that. Let's say that you're working on a very, very sensitive, for instance, a banking application, and you need to do some edits to a DNS zone, for instance. This is a prod environment, so you have a manager there, so that where you say, I want owner access, you write a reason why, and this individual then accepts this access then, and then you can go on and do your things, and after that the access will be revoked after a couple of hours. There is the possibility also, when someone activates this role, that the correct people will get a notification, for instance, an email notification. And of course, there is plenty of logging, who and what and where people are accessing things. As I mentioned earlier, this is a service that requires a P2 license, for instance, a Microsoft 365 E5 license on the users utilizing this. And I will show you in a bit, just quickly, how PIM works. So the next part is conditional access, and conditional access is also, it's a Azure AD native functionality. It's a licensed functionality from a P1 license, meaning you will need something like a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license to be able to add this functionality. So how you should describe conditional access is it's a set of if and or statements that together becomes an allowed access to a service or application, or a blocking of that. And that could be, for instance, a web application that is using modern authentication, meaning that the web application is integrated as a application in Azure AD. So let's say we have user A who wants to access that. Then what we're looking at the properties or the signals of that user. So we're looking at first, who is this user? Who is he or she a what is he or she a member of group-wise? We can be looking at things such as location, and if possible, it can be GPS location. It can be an IP-based location if this person is coming from a certain country's IP ranges. It could be what kind of device is this user coming from? Is this a Android mobile device? Is this a AD joined device? And so on. And we're looking at what application is this user actually accessing the application through. So when thinking about applications, most likely it's a web application that we are accessing it through, but it can be also something like Outlook, that the individual is using the Outlook client, or Azure Virtual Desktop, that the individual is accessing it through the desktop client. So all of this becomes a rule set where we set a bunch of allow or denies based on all of these signals that can then end up into an allow access. But basically, if we have enough things allowed, we can simply allow it, or we can have an allow but with. So we allow if you come with these preconditions, then you are allowed. And it can also become a blocker. Let's say that you are coming in from a certain country, then that will be an automatic blocker. So let's look into these signals a bit and what exactly these signals are, and the most common ones. We're also going to look into this in a demo in just a bit. So the common signals, of course, is the user and group membership. What kind of groups are this individual a member of? We can say only members of, let's say, VPN users group can access a VPN application that then will gain access to the internal network if we have that possibility. We can use location info, IP location info, for instance, but also GPS-based location info if we're utilizing a smartphone. And the device type, of course. Is this a MacBook? Is this a Android phone, etc., etc.? We can differentiate on this. And as I mentioned, application, if it's a web application, it's a specific application. And then a risk. And we're going to talk a bit about risk in just a second here, about what exactly a risk is. So we're going to look into that. And that's real-time risk if we're seeing that this individual is coming from a really strange IP or so IP that's have been affiliated with something malicious earlier, or a calculated risk. We see that this is a risky user that has over time built up a high risk score. So we're not just looking at that risk score in just a second. And we can also take in signals from Defender for Cloud Apps, which we won't sadly go into details for today. And all of these signals becomes a decision, and a block, that's a block, we won't allow it. But we can't, for instance, say that if you come with a certain amount of, like from this location with this device, then we require MFA. But we can also say that we can just grant it without any of these extra requirements. If you, let's say you come from a, let's say IP location based on your VAN, your company's VAN. So we see you're surfing from the company network. You are coming in via the correct application. You have a low risk, and you have the correct memberships. Then we can simply grant you without even asking for multi-factor authentication. So there's a whole bunch of things how we can utilize conditional access, and I'll show you that in a bit. Then we have Azure Identity Protections, and this is the thing of what I was talking about with the user risks. So first off, we need to understand the vast amount of signals that Azure and Microsoft is collecting every single day. These signals that it can originate in your own Azure Active Directory tenant. It can be a simple thing as where are you logging in from? Are you logging in from things from a location that is a strange location? But it can also be collected info that might be not even is coming from your tenant. It might be coming from across the world, from a large attack happening with, say, Xbox accounts or something like that. Where we see that we have a certain amount, a certain IP ranges that are used for some quite malicious attacks. And then if we see that some users trying to log in from one of those IP ranges, then the risk level can be heightened with that. And we have the possibility then for automatic remediation, meaning we can block things that are marked as high risk, and we're going to see a bit about the risk classes and what actually what defines those risk classes. So what the possibility that you can do as well is you can look into the risky users. So not only can you, let's say, immediately act upon with conditional access to block risky sign-ins or risky users, you can also within the Azure AD, and I'll show you this briefly where you find it. You can look into and get a list of all these users. This is a functionality, by the way, that is dependent a bit on what type of license you have. You will always get basic risk data, but you will get more granular risk data depending on the license that is used. So, but you have the possibility to look into the sign-in risks. Have you seen some strange signings, perhaps, or blocked signings, or have you seen users that are at risk? We can list that, and we can afterwards take action upon it. For instance, you can force a password reset for a user that might have been part of a password dump or something like that, and we can block users, etc., and a whole bunch of action actually. But we can also export this data to some other solution. For instance, we can put it into log analytics, because this data is it's saved for, I don't have the exact amount of days, but absolutely not more than 90 days. But if you need to have this data saved even further, you can export this data to log analytics, meaning that you can still easily search for these users, even though the data is very old. If you only need the data for, let's say, for compliance reasons, but you don't need to search in it actively, you can also export the data to storage accounts, which is of course cheaper in the long run. And if you want to act upon this data with, let's say, another system, you can export these to event hubs, when you stream these to event hubs, which then will act upon it or will push this data to, let's say, an application that then can work with it. And then, of course, you can push this to Sentinel, where you can, for instance, and we will talk about Sentinel actually next month. But with Sentinel, you can, for instance, you can correlate this data. So let's say you have a risk user coming in from a certain IP, and you have a breach happening from a certain IP. You can correlate that data. You can, for instance, if you have data coming in from, you are importing data from, let's say, your Cisco firewall, you can correlate that data as well in Sentinel. So we will go into that in detail, but it's just you have the possibility to redirect this data to where it is needed, if it's needed now or in the future, or just for storage. And just when it comes to these risk definitions, so these are a few, but I would say the most common risk definitions that will give a user or assigning a risk class. And that's, of course, anonymous IP usage. That does not mean that you are automatically a strange individual or a high risk individual, but it could be that you are coming from, let's say, a public VPN solution, maybe something like NordVPN or something like that. It can also be atypical travel. And what I mean with atypical travel, it can be such a simple thing as someone who has just logged in from, let's say, Malmö for all day, every day for the last 2 years, and suddenly is logging in from Hong Kong. So this is atypical travel. It breaks the norm, but this doesn't mean necessarily that this is automatically a extremely high risk user, but it is something that we might flag for. But definitely high risk atypical travel, that's travel that you simply can't do. let's say you have at 9 a.m. you have a user logging in Los Angeles, and then 2 hours later he is logging in Hong Kong, for instance. That is a typical behavior when a user has a leaked credentials or perhaps is or breached account and is logged in from several places at once. And then with the malicious activity linked IPs, that means that you have IPs that are have been involved in, let's say, large attacks that Microsoft have already found out about through other signals. So let's say a user is coming from logging in from one of those IP ranges that could elevate the risk level depending on the IP range. Of course, there are familiar sign-in behavior, signing in from different apps and different computers and all that can become a higher risk level. Leaked credentials, so Microsoft has access to leaked credential data. So for instance, if your user has been registered as a or has been found in a password dump, that could put it at a higher risk. And password sprays, of course, meaning you're bombarding a application or a login with different passwords. And these risk levels, so I want to mention that these risk levels, we don't have a perfect insight in what exactly defines a high level of risk, a medium, a low level of risk. This is something that Microsoft defines, but we can make some assumptions. Let's say a typical travel together with leaked credentials, together with attack or logging from an malicious IP, that could very well be a high risk level. So yeah, that's the risk definitions. And then I want to just quickly talk a bit about the service principles. So service principle and managed identities. So really quick about what a service principle is. This is a secure identity, much like any other user in Azure AD, that is used for an application to integrate with, for instance, an Azure Active Directory or with another Azure resource. An example for this could be, to take two examples, we can take a third-party application that needs to have access to your users in Active Directory. You can have a service principle with the correct rights, then an app registration, also known as, that has the possibility to read in the AD, and that then with that service principle you can pull the AD, or the application can pull the AD. Another thing could be, let's say, a backup solution. An example is Veeam Backup for Azure, utilizes service principles, and that is where you need to actually work on the Azure subscription level. You need to modify certain resources or start VMs, etc., etc. So then you have a service principle that has access rights on a subscription level, much like a user can have RBAC rights on a subscription. And the thing about these is these are basically a username and password. They are very secure in the sense that the username is a GUID, password is usually very, very long, and you only see the password once. But still, if this is utilized as a connection string, that connection string can still be, of course, breached, or theoretically breached. And you have also the possibility to utilize a certificate also. What you can do to secure this service principle, you can use a solution such as a key vault, for instance, to secure this this connection string within. So that's slightly more secure, but is not absolutely perfect. A solution that is possible to use instead of service principle is managed identity. And I will also show how this works in just a bit. But managed identity is basically a identity that is based upon Azure resources. It's only used for Azure resources. And it could be, for for instance, that instead of you giving the application the connection string and a possibility to access a database, you give the system that is running it the possibility to access the database. So, for instance, you can take a virtual machine and you can add that to a user-assigned managed identity. And then you take that managed identity and give it the correct access rights onto the RBAC access rights onto that SQL database. This might be a bit strange because this means that your connection string within the application, it will basically just be, well, database name and database, no username, no password. You will have to do a slight modification to the application. It will have to simplify this extremely. It will have to ask for a token that it can access this database or whatever resource it will be utilizing. But what will happen then is you will simply add those rights as RBAC rights. And the good thing about this is, let's say you have an application that you might be migrating and so on, then you don't have to care that much about the connection strings. You define those rather with the on the machine level. But what we need to understand that this only works with services that allows Azure AD authentication, and those services could be key vaults, for instance. That could be a SQL database and things like that. These exist in two different ways. Basically, it's system assigned and user assigned. System assigned means that you can, let's say, hop into a VM, you enable the managed identity, and then that computer, that virtual machine, gets its own identity. And then you can simply search for the name of the computer, let's say Kim's PC. I hop into the RBAC of a what's called SQL database. I search for Kim's PC. I give it the owner rights, and that's that. The problem, of course, is if you have a system, let's say a highly available web application over 4 or 5 virtual machines, then you can instead use a user-assigned identity, where you instead add the machine to the identity or add the identity to the machine. It depends on how you look at it, and then just add that one single identity instead. So it simplifies quite a lot the management there. So that concludes my my presentation. I'll have a double of that. So let's do a quick demo about the privileged identity management. So what I do, I simply search for PIM, and now we're simply going to use this with Azure AD roles. So what I do, I hop into Azure AD. Let's say now to the roles. Now I've actually added myself. I've given myself a role, so I can just show you how it works. I will give myself the billing administrator role, for instance. Oh well, let's go with something else. Something that won't lock me out. Windows 365 administrator, for instance, and that will apply to the whole directory. And I will add myself to that role. And that's me. Go next, and we can have it active, meaning that this role will always be active, much like a what's it called? Just a direct assignment. But a liable means that I can ask for this. I can put this the assignment to be permanently liable, but I can also set it to a time base. So let's say I'm involved in a project where I need to have this role, but it ends, let's say, in 5th of March, then and it will automatically be removed. Simply click assign, and that's that. So now we see that I have this one. So if I want to then utilize this role, what I do, into my roles for a bit, And then I hop into this, I click activate, and I will set a time. How long will it be active? I will use it for 3 hours, and I need to I give a justification if I have set up a justification system. I haven't in this case. And then I simply click activate. So what's happening now, it's if I would have a let's say a step with MFA, I would ask for MFA. Let's say I would have someone who would need to approve, that individual would need to approve this. So this goes fairly quick when it's automated. So we just wait for it. It shouldn't take that long at all. Yeah. There we go. So now it's active, and we can see under active assignments that I do have this administrator role active, and it will end here at 5 minutes to 2 p.m. So and I can also deactivate it already here, so I won't be doing that now. Then we talked a bit about these risky users, risk assignments. So let me just show you that. We will hop into Azure Active Directory, and then we can hop into sign in logs. I'm sure this. Sorry about this. It seems like there's been some changes here from last I messed with this. So we'll hop over that and hop straight into conditional access. So for conditional access, just search for conditional. And I already have a rule, but let's create a rule for Azure or for Azure Virtual Desktop that I can only access it from Sweden with MFA. So first, what I need to do, I need to create a location. I've already created a location, home, 127.0.1. That's definitely home. But let's say a country location based upon GPS coordinates. That one is then Sweden. We can just then search for Sweden here in the list. There we go. Great. Now we have created the location type Sweden. And what we do then is hop into policies. Policy. I will give this the name allow ABD Sweden. So first off, who will this affect? It will affect every single user in my account. I think, yeah, I will utilize that. Then what sort of application will this be covering? I could do all cloud apps. This could lock me easily out of everything. So be really wary of using this, because this also covers the Azure portal. So I will select the name. It is Windows. So it's Azure Virtual Desktop, and then it's the application called, and the conditions. So in this case, we say that we only allow low risk users. We only allow low and no risk sign-ins. The device is only allowed from, let's say, Windows machines. And the location, here we go, selected locations. So we can use trusted locations. That could be a whole bunch of locations. Then I simply select all trusted locations. But I only select Sweden in this case. So we only allow for Sweden. The client application, that will only be, in this case, the mobile app and desktop client, or in this case, the Azure Virtual Desktop client. And filter for devices here, can add a filter. Let's say I will exclude filters that with certain properties. I won't be doing that today. And what will happen then is I will grant access, and I will require multi-factor authentication for that. And let's see. Let's not mess with that one. And here, the thing that we will do then, I can set this to report only. That will mean that these logins will be reported. I can set it to on, then it will be active, or off. Let's say if I want to edit even more before I set it to on. So set it on and create, and that is that. And now I see we are running out of time, so I will really speed run through the managed identity. So I have created a managed identity already. You create those, just create. You can only give them a name and a location. That's basically it. So I created a managed identity called my managed identity. I want to give it to my colleague Niklas. He has a PC here. I think it's called Niklas Dev PC. PC01. So what I do, I search up identity in this pane. Here you have it. He already has a system assigned identity on. He just selected on there, but I will add a user assigned identity as well. Here we have only one, my managed identity. I'll add that one. And what I want this PC to be able to do, or this machine to be able to do, I want it to be able to access a key vault. So I've already created a key vault. This one. And what we want to do is we want this PC to be able to fetch keys from this, or application is running on this PC to fetch keys. So I go into access configuration and access policies. And what I do, I create an access policy. So I just select template. Go. And the principal that is gonna cover is search for my managed identity. You saw that Niklas also had a system assigned identity. And remember, the machine was called Niklas Dev PC. So we simply search for Niklas. There we have it, Niklas Dev PC01. But we will select my managed identity, just like that. Next, next, great. And that's that. So that's as simple as it is to utilize managed identities. Now I see we're 2 minutes over time. So I just want to say thank you for listening in. Thank you for being with us today, this hour. And this session will be available also on YouTube afterwards, if you want to look at it after that.
Thank you so much, Kim.